Hey y'all, welcome to the Moving with Millennials podcast with your favorite millennial realtors.
We are 4 top producing agents in the DFW area, and we are ready to share the good, bad, and the real life of real estate.
Whether you're thinking about getting into real estate, already an agent, or just curious about what your agent really does, join us.
Tune in every Wednesday to see what it's really like to be on this side of the transaction.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us this week. It is Brandie, Maggie, Mariana, and Jake. Sometimes we record with an outline and sometimes we just have a casual talk, and this episode is going to be more of the casual conversation. Today we are going to cover the bad, the worst, and the ugly of transactions.
Because they're not all perfect. Very rarely they are.
Yeah, everything that can go wrong in a real estate transaction. So if you're considering getting your license, turn the volume up just a little bit.
This is to scare you away.
No.
Yeah. I think the reason.
Let's start with have you guys actually had what do you think the percentage of a smooth transaction is?
I would say, I think it's important that we do this, and going off what you just asked, is because things are going to happen. It's probably I would say 100% of your transactions are probably going to have some sort of issue.
Something.
How big those issues are
varies.
Varies.
And which side they are on, whether or not it affects you or the other side. Ultimately it's still the same transaction, but sometimes it's that's on your side of the transaction. You can get that tied up for me and come back,
Yeah. In the 8 years I've been doing this, I could probably tell you maybe 1 or 2 that were perfect. And the whole time I'm okay, something is about to go wrong.
Yeah. Why
because nothing's going wrong. So,
do you guys have a conversation with your clients to kind of set those expectations?
Yes.
I think that's really important too before we get into this.
Absolutely.
Especially for inspection or just going under contract.
And if it's their first time buying, right? They don't know if it's their first time buying.
Yeah. And depending on the market. So right now I tell people it is very common for contracts to fall through.
Me too.
It's something that people are getting homes under contract before they even see them, and they're using their option period to terminate. There's various factors of why that is or why that can happen. But that's something I tell clients, especially on the listing side. I will do everything to vet the contract for us and, present the offers, and we'll talk about, strongest and which ones we think are bulletproof and likely to make it to the end. But ultimately terminations happen. So I think that's really important to have that up front.
Right. And I ask, on the listing side, are your buyers under contract on another house, or are they, I ask about the buyers for sure, because you can get a feel for, not that they're straight up going to say oh yeah, they're under contract.
We all know our way of influencing, the price too high feedback.
Yeah. So it's I don't know. It's just important to know what you're about to.
You're right. It's about setting the expectation, but also staying ahead of the issues.
Correct.
I think that's the biggest job that you start to realize you have in a real estate transaction, because you can stay ahead of a lot of issues. If the appraisal comes in low, what's going to happen? So setting that expectation that it could come in low and talking through that just to warn them. But I think there's also a fine line that you're not going to tell them here's all the issues that could go wrong, because it could be that it doesn't. And I think my most common script is, if I could predict the future on how this transaction is going to go, I would let you know. But it's hard for me to predict, so I don't want to worry you over something that may or may not happen. But when we get there, I know how to handle it.
I think that's why it's important for them to have an agent they trust, right? As long as they hire someone they trust, they know that we can confidently handle everything we get thrown our way. And
or even if you're a brand new agent or something and you don't, because every real estate transaction is different, and you don't know how to handle it, you know how to figure it out. So you know who to ask. And having people that you should see some of the text. We constantly
we're always in touch.
We're here's the situation, what should I do? And it's seeing other opinions, talking to your broker. If you should definitely be talking to your broker sometimes.
Raise your hand or actually, since you guys are recording or listening to us, have each one of you, I'm going to go down the line, have you had to talk to James Tan for an issue?
Yes.
Have you had to talk?
Yes.
And yes. So we have everything from in real estate a year and a half, but not even at our office for a year, right? So in less than a year, she's had to talk to our broker. Maggie and I, 2 years, we've already had to talk to broker. And Mariana, lots of years.
Yeah, lots of years. The grandma. And I think, again, it's you, especially if it's a legal issue or it's something that could be an ethics issue or come back on you. You have to remember, especially if you have a broker, that your broker is the one who, it's their transaction.
Right.
You're working for that broker. So it is important that you involve your broker when the time comes. Little issues here and there that you should be able to figure out, doesn't necessarily need a broker, but big issues for sure.
For sure.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So let's talk about, let's just start with like, what could go wrong in a real estate transaction? Maybe what's the most common thing that goes wrong, and tell little stories on how that's happened.
Financing.
Financing, I think, is the biggest one.
It's the biggest one. And I think most commonly it's a delay of closing.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's common that like it doesn't make it to the finish line, but I think it's very common. It's like we need 3 more days, 4 more days, 1 more week. And so then at that point, the things that can go wrong with that are almost infinite. Like once you then open up that can of worms of like, oh, we need to move closing.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like, I've had, for this house, it was, if we have to move closing, the agent on the other side was saying, well, then we need to extend our lease back.
Right.
Or then we need to do this. And you're like, I can't do that.
You've got movers and things like that.
Yeah.
It is
have
fun.
another house to sell, or I have like other things riding on it.
Right.
And
So I would say this is one of my, not the bad, this is maybe the ugly or the worst, not the ugliest. Well, actually, this was probably up to the ugliest. Yeah.
Also, if you are listening and you're our clients, we are not going to say names. So if you hear your story,
and
we will never.
This usually is not anything negative to do with like our clients or anything like that.
Yeah, it's just stories.
So this was my client that was put into a hard situation because because of financing, we did need to extend closing. So of course, we're on the buy side. We asked to extend it. Unfortunately, the sellers are moving out of state and had back-to-back closings. So they were going to close on their sell here and their buy there in the same day. They were planning on like moving trucks. They were going to sign for ours remotely, already in the new state. And so that pretty much is just like an avalanche of like, oh my God, everything that can possibly go wrong is going wrong. So we did have to extend. They had to extend their purchase on the other side. Moving trucks had to change, which is of course an expense on their side. Seller, I think at that point I had negotiated some seller paid closing costs, so those got renegotiated since we were costing them, quote unquote, were costing them extra time. And that one got pretty escalated. I think, both agents on each side, we were trying to stay very level-headed. Clients, of course, were trying to stay level-headed. It got a little heated, and I think that's one of my transactions that James Tan eventually got involved on because there was just a lot of back and forth of like, how did this happen? And ultimately, it comes down to something that in reality, not a single person controls financing.
Right.
So it's like, if it's an underwriting, yes, it's sitting with one underwriter, but that one underwriter may have like 23 other files in front of them, and those 23 may literally all be in the same situation. We need to close tomorrow. What are you going to do?
I think the hardest part with pushing back closing is when you don't have enough time to like react or like change movers and closing dates and things. I always love it is, and it's frustrating for both parties and agents and everybody involved because you're having to move your schedule around. They're having to, utilities, all the things that have to get changed. But I think staying ahead of it, and now we've learned how to like do that. It's like at least a week before closing, coming and talking to the lender, making sure we're checking in, seeing where finances are. Because now we have a 3-day rule where you have to get the clear to close 3 days before signing. So at least we have that. That's also a good indicator on, are you going to have to push back closing or not? And I think setting that expectation that we may or may not have to and enough time helps a lot.
For sure.
So.
I think also something that I do as a listing agent, when I have a client that's listing and buying, I don't allow them to set up. You're not going to close on your sell and close on your buy in the same day.
No.
I prefer at least 3 days in between, if not a week. So like if we're closing on a Friday for their sell, then I'm like, great, we're going to need a lease back until the following Friday. And then we'll try to close like the Wednesday before, and then you guys still have 2 days to move.
Especially when you're waiting on funds from one to go move.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Although,
I had a transaction 2 days ago that still hasn't funded fully.
Right.
Like,
what
you
is
have no idea, like, when it's going to funds, like, you just need that gap time.
And it can,
and staying ahead of it too. Like if I do know it's closing one and funds are needing to go to the other, those funds don't hit my client's account. They're wired directly from one title company to the other title company. Because again, there's no need for those extra days of processing again. So it's about staying ahead of it. But yes, that was probably one of my ugliest, was James Tan having to get involved just because we needed to extend a few days.
Yeah,
for sure. Pretty. And you can, I see the most common extensions because of financing, or they just need a couple days, or like repairs aren't done. Like what else are y'all seeing? Like 2 of mine this week we had to extend because we were clear to close on both of them, And the repairs weren't done.
So yeah, repairs is a whole other thing on extending closing. And that's why when I go under contract or we're negotiating repairs, I'm trying to negotiate compensation money in lieu of repairs now more than I am trying to get repairs, because with repairs, it's very subject where they could come in and make the repair and it's maybe satisfactory to them, but my buyer may come in and go, well, this wasn't done correctly. And what's correctly? I mean, electrician's saying it's done right, but maybe it's not up to your standard. Yeah. So I'm really pushing towards like trying to get money so they can make those repairs after closing.
Do your lenders have any issue with that? I've always heard that like lenders don't always love asking for money in lieu of work being done.
No, well, yeah, that's where I do 2 different amendments. So I do
the same.
If there's a repair, if there's repairs being done, that's one amendment. With I have the repairs, the lender never sees that, so that way there's no lender issues. And then I always do an amendment, and it's not. I don't put anything in there about in lieu of repairs. It's just whatever that box is and says X amount of dollars, like as if
seller credit.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So I say nothing about repairs, so the lenders don't flag it.
Yes. So if you're listening, that's your way around that.
There you go.
For sure.
But no, I would say probably for me, the craziest when it comes to like extending closing is always, I don't know if it's just something about like when, of course, a buy and sell is involved. So of course, because you have now these contingencies, I was on the seller side, which was probably the harder thing because I had less control over financing. Because I'm not on the buyer side, but the buyer kept getting delayed, but we couldn't get answers on why it was being delayed because the lender wasn't disclosing any information to me, and that's because he can't tell me, issues about the buyer. Like there are some things.
He can tell you status, where it is in the pipeline.
Right.
So he can tell you if it's an underwriting, if it's an, something else. He can tell you that, but can't tell you any issues.
Like issues with that particular buyer or anything. But it kept getting delayed. Well, my buyer or my sellers were also looking to buy, and we were contingent on the sale of their home. This was like one of my very first transactions. I don't know what it is about your first and second transaction.
My first one was crazy.
Yeah, it's always like one of the worst. And it just happens that way. Again, and it's not because we do anything wrong as it being our first. It's just there's things that are out of our control. But
you have no idea what to expect when you're doing it new.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not just that, but I don't know. It's just like the real estate universe telling you like, here you go. Here's the worst of it. It'll get better though. And you're like, please. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it basically delayed us now from buying the home, and they could not live in there was no temporary housing options for them because they weren't able to move with family. Like we weren't able to do anything. It just was this worst case scenario we had to have this happen. So it was definitely a struggle. Setting the expectations with my buyer, or my buyer seller was really tough, but I think, we've talked about this, like going through those struggles and going through that one in the very beginning, it helped me because then of course my next time I had to buy and sell, I was like, look, this could happen. And I was more prepared. So, yeah.
Definitely. I think, are we talking about closing in general? Like
delays? Or financing delays.
Yeah. I mean,
we can talk funny stories on the back because I know we have a couple that are not related to closing, but
a really good one. We'll save that towards the end. But I'd say the worst, probably the most heartbreaking one was seller was in default. I was representing the buyer. The buyer was clear to close. We got through appraisal, everything, negotiations, and a few days before closing, the seller could not pay off. This was an investment property for the seller, and
they were upside down.
They were behind on their payments and could not make it work. So my buyer had to terminate, and he was sad. Such a trooper about it. I felt awful, but
I've had the opposite side. I've represented a seller that the buyer's financing. They were getting, an assistance program, but the way that the lender told them to pull money out of a 401k for something messed up their ability, messed up their debt to income. So then it's not that they couldn't qualify for our loan, they could no longer qualify for a loan.
Any loan.
And so when the agent called me and she's like, we need to terminate, I was like, oh my gosh. And then when she told me the full story, I was like, I'm going to connect you with one of my preferred lenders. And you need to interview him, and I can send you interview new lenders because that shouldn't happen from a lender's perspective. And so now you have a client that is going to be upset with you, and really, it's not your fault. and it is in a way that lenders, you know, maybe not their fault, but it's definitely something that should have been caught. So I just kind of like try to, and now she actually does use one of my preferred lenders. I've talked to her a couple times since then about how thankful she is. But
and I think that's important for us to have those contacts, right? To know like we have someone who we can go to, who will go to bat for us and represent our clients in the best way. And I think before you're in real estate, you're like, well, why does this realtor send me their preferred? Like, why does it matter? And then from the inside, it's like, it's because I can trust these people to get the job done.
Yeah.
That's the only reason we knew the truth of the issue. The original lender didn't really explain what it was. We sent it to my lender, and my lender was like, oh, it's because he told him to do X, Y, and Z. He can't get any loan now.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just was like,
wow.
Okay.
yeah.
But, and I think,
okay.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think you're right. Like having a good lender for sure on the buyer side.
Definitely.
And that's why we do push like our recommended lenders, because we know that they're going to ask for all the documents up front.
Right.
They're going to there's a difference between being pre-qualified and pre-approved.
Right.
They're basically going to get you all the way to pre-approved minus the house. To where that's when you're pre-approved, is once you finally have the house and you're conditionally approved. But having someone good, and that's why we kind of push back on like even big banks, because banks are the worst. They will say they're going to loan you all this
Bank of America's
money.
not going to be sponsoring this.
Big lenders, like they're very lenient. They do not request all the documents that they should up front. Communication slower. I will say most of my closing delays have been because of a bigger bank.
I just had Bank of America push us 3 weeks back, and it's for
That
a
is
military
ridiculous.
family who has to be
Right.
out and at their next station.
And I'm sure there are good loan officers at those banks. I feel like we're like,
Yeah,
I know anyone that works at Bank of America. It's just that.
But think about it
Local
this way.
lenders just
Well, think about it this way. Big banks don't just loan on
I-
mortgages.
Exactly.
They
That's what I say
loan
to
on all, business loans, personal loans, all the things. So like they have way too many, and there's too many people involved
Right.
for you to get for it to be a clean file.
Someone that only does mortgage loans all day, every day, locally, I think
Less.
is
Locally,
just the
keyword
preference.
local,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of those like internet-based lenders, I mean, that is
Yeah. And
I
a
don't
whole
wanna be
nother
too-
one.
If they send you a pre-approval amount and you've never spoken to them, probably don't use them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's like a computer bait, like an appraiser. They're gonna send an the biggest thing is you don't want an appraiser in Wisconsin, going to a
Or I don't want a South Lake appraiser appraising my North Dallas condo. I mean, they
It's
do
even-
not.
No,
I
the
think
mark-
it
yeah.
really is very niche specific geographically for appraisers.
Yeah.
even
and
for
that's important.
local lender to be able
Especially
to. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No. We kind of.
off. Go.
I was just gonna say it's especially important right now with these over asking cash or over asking any offer, not cash.
Yeah.
With appraisals because
Yeah.
Right.
I mean we're already struggling with that.
I had it was me. I was the client and I was also the agent. For our house, Pat's job is obviously very weird, and he has 1-year deals. So he doesn't have like a 12-year contract for funds. And so when we bought this house, the lender dropped us we had a 14-day financing period, and they dropped us like on day 12. So we had to get to the closing table and through lending with a whole new lender, and it just like stuff like that happens.
Yeah.
And just like it's
I remember that.
just
But you
so-
got y'all.
we didn't know we were set to close until literally the night before.
That's crazy.
And he was like, we can do it.
Wow.
And now we're in her beautiful house.
Yeah. So okay, so I
so
guess we can all
wild.
agree like financing is probably the most common or one of
Absolutely.
the biggest things. But what's like do you guys have another funny story of like a transaction like that's been
It's not funny,
Ugly
but
or-
I have one that like literally I wanted to rip my hair out. Was the house after we closed, there was an issue and they called us wanting compensation. And when we did our final walkthrough and everything, the house was in mint condition, and they called me 4 days later saying that her clients had issues with the home, and that's when I had to get James involved, because James was like, well, on closing day it was
in the condition. Did y'all do a walkthrough?
everyone did a walkthrough.
Do you do the walkthrough form? Do y'all make your clients sign the walkthrough form?
I don't
I don't on my buy side, but for listings I request them from the buyers.
really.
Oh, okay.
I should. I feel like
Yeah.
that's a great. There is a form. Yeah, you can have them sign off on like they did a walkthrough and they. Yes,
Or
I think it
accepting
is.
the property in the
That's-
current conditions.
Yeah.
Do you
That's
have
really
that
smart.
at closing? They do that at closing?
No,
or?
I send it to the buyer's agent on my listings, and I request that they DocuSign it after doing their final walkthrough, and it has to be back to me before closing.
Yeah, I've gotten that like once, so I liked it.
Yeah,
Smart.
That is.
They waited
don't make my buyers do it, but I
Yeah.
make on the listing side. I'll make the other
They
buyers do
waited
it.
4 days. It was a list. Yeah, one of my listings. They waited for 4 days, and so I was like, well,
Yeah.
you've had so much time to do something. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that
Yeah.
is part of it. Again, I'll go down the row. Raise your hand if you've had a client or another agent on the opposite side contact you and say there was something wrong with the house after move-in. Brandie,
Yes.
obviously you. Maggie?
I don't think so.
Really?
Surprisingly.
Wow.
I'm trying to think. This is a caught off guard question. Oh, yeah. I mean, yes. The cabinets. I have another story.
Okay.
Yes.
I
Mariana?
definitely have, yeah.
I did too. I've had both foundation issues suddenly appear and
Suddenly.
and plumbing issues.
What's funny too is, I mean, we're not inspectors, and that's one thing we have to like explain to our clients. Like, we're not inspectors, so it's funny how like some of that blame gets put back on us. Like, we should have known it had issues, kind of thing.
well, legally, we're not allowed to say anything either.
Well, I mean, we give
You
our
disclose
advice.
what you know, right?
Right.
Yeah, but we can't legally say like as an inspector, like obviously, what you're saying
Right.
is true.
And so I think, again, setting that expectation or whatnot just to kind of protect ourselves is also important, because I mean, even my own personal house, like 3 months after closing, we had foundation issues, and it was because of the trees underneath. So now we've had to spend money on foundation and plumbing. Oh yeah, like a month after closing, we had a root growing into the plumbing. Well, of course, that's not something, that was brand new, but my seller probably really didn't know about it, because most sellers don't know about those little issues. But it's something that's part of home ownership.
And an average inspector is not running a camera through plumbing
Right,
lines to discover those things. They're checking water pressure, and that literally can be a difference of the root was not penetrating the pipe, and then literally a day later, it finally pushes through. It's like that. It's like it grows and grows and grows, but eventually is
Right.
what
It just was what, and I don't know what it is about the first year of homeownership. That's when all
It's
the
the rough
issues
edge.
happen.
Yeah.
That's why you get a home warranty, because the home warranty did come out and unclog it. They found it. Now they didn't cover the root because that's not part of the warranty, but at least they found it and
The issue.
cleared the issue.
Yeah.
So
So I recently, in one of mine, I just thought of like 5 different ones that were issues. Have y'all done solar panels before?
yes.
Oh my. Okay. So
That's a whole nother topic.
Yeah. Anyways, basically the solar panels, they were paid off, but the buyers still don't have authorization of them. So I've been having to call this solar panel company.
You're still having to deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are things that, us as agents, like, I don't think people realize, like, we aren't just walking you through a transaction. Months after we close, we're still walking through these issues. I get calls from my clients like, hey, this plumbing went out or whatever it is, and I'm able to refer them to my plumber. So it's like, not that that's all part of the bad and ugly part of real estate, but it is more than just the transaction too. Like, there's more to it.
I was really lucky on mine. So this is probably the bad, not the ugly or the worst. But I represented the buyers. It was a flip. We had asked for repair for a plumbing issue. It had been repaired, but then after just a little bit of use, the issue came back. And so we were actually, I talked to the listing agent and the previous owner that did a flip. I was like, quality of construction, word of mouth, let's do the math here. And she's like, nope, we totally understand. She's like, we're happy to take care of it. And I was like, oh, great, awesome. I really appreciate that. She's like, yeah, she's like, we stand behind our work and we're happy to take care of it. She's like, so if we repair it, and she's like, and we'll take care of it as many times as we need to get it permanently fixed.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic.
Yeah, going off repairs, actually during one of our final it wasn't during the final walkthrough, we had a contractor, this was recent.
That's what I thought of earlier.
It
your
was,
situation.
We had a contractor coming in a week before closing just to get some estimates on like changing out, the flooring, things like that, basic stuff. When we got there, the house was vacant, it hadn't been lived in, probably a couple months at this point. And when we got there, the AC, something had happened with the AC unit. At the time of inspection, it was working. So something happened between then and the time we walked in the house with the contractor. We went up into the upstairs master bathroom, and I posted photos on this on Instagram and social. Literally, the whole ceiling. I remember walking through the contractor, and he's getting things. He's like, okay, so you're going to need this. And he walks into the bathroom before me. He goes, are you guys going to need a quote on this? And I look and I'm like, what are you talking about? And I went, oh my gosh. I'm like, yeah, I think we're going to need a quote. The whole ceiling, because the pan had,
The condensation pan.
Yeah, the condensation pan had flooded, and completely the whole ceiling and insulation, all that had fallen out from underneath it. So, of course, it looked like a, war zone walking into it.
You're gonna have
It's
to post
not-
a picture. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll post a picture so you guys get a full effect of the whole image, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. I know that sounds really oh my gosh, I would die. It's one of those things that it happens.
Right.
It's fixable. Pretty much everything in real estate home is fixable, but it was one of those things where oh my gosh, we're a week before closing. So it was a quick little turnaround on getting some fixes done. It all worked out, but it was crazy for a minute there. So that was probably one of my most recent horror stories.
Sure. I had one last summer. It was a flip. The heat was working that summer after they closed. And then during that winter storm, I guess something happened. It didn't have anything to do with the winter storm. It had already been an issue. Someone went out and determined that. But basically something wasn't connected, and the inspector missed it, who I don't work with anymore. But the seller went back out and made it right. So
Did any of y'all have issues with the freeze?
No.
We had a big freeze
Luckily.
in February.
Oh, I had clients, but I didn't personally.
Yeah, I didn't either.
No,
you had clients though that had issues with it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Had a listing.
Leaks.
The problem that we ran into was we had just bought this house, and it was just, we just didn't know our gas tank was empty. So we didn't know what's on gas, is our heat on gas, or everything. So that was a panic zone for a while.
Yeah.
But my showers froze. You had to have a heater on them and dripping, or they would.
Yeah. Which was not
Scary.
fun. Yeah.
I feel like some of the other stories could possibly just come from showings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or open houses even.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Showings.
So
What's the
in
worst
general,
house you've walked through?
showings are my favorite. That's a lot of good interaction with clients. And a lot of times, I think all four of us at times also leverage showing assistance to where, we're busy, and honestly, showings are not the most important part of our job. The most important part of our job, I would say, is writing the contract and negotiating the contract. And really, contract to close is a huge part of our job. Showings, it's a good chance for us to get to know you, but if we can't be there, it's not the end of the world. But I feel like I've had some really fascinating showings.
What's the worst house you've walked through?
So we have definitely, a client and I walked through one, and we were very convinced, one, that we were being videotaped.
Oh my
and
gosh.
two, that was likely used for human trafficking. I think that my client even called some sort of hotline or something. There were several extra kind of hidden rooms that were off of weird hallways, and they were half heights, and they all had deadbolts that were locked from the outside of the room, in the hallway side.
Oh my gosh.
So people would be locked in, and they had twin size mattresses on the floor, trash everywhere.
When was this and where?
This was in the west side of the Metroplex.
Okay.
And it was over a year ago. And I remember I wanted to bathe in hand sanitizer after we left, because I was I just
freaky.
feel
Yeah.
disgusting on the outside and the inside. So creeped out. When we walked in, there was a televangelist TV show playing. And it just was, the floor plan was odd. They had added to the house, but in very strange ways. And both of us were just so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But yeah, mattresses.
Has that house sold?
There were weird. I don't know. I do not want to go back and look. And I talked to the listing agent actually, because I was I'm a little shocked that that it was in this condition. And he was yep, we're just trying to offload it quickly. That's the only response. I'm well, yeah.
Was it priced correctly?
I'm is your client running from the FBI or something? What is going on here?
Yeah.
That is
It
so
was
freaky.
scary. So
Yeah.
scary.
Was it at
So-
least priced correctly?
It was not priced totally below market value. Shocker.
That
As
is
if it was
crazy.
updated?
Yeah.
Maybe all of those things added some quorkiness to it.
No.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
I've seen a garage full of. At first, we thought it was. At first, I thought it was, or we thought, my client and I thought it was Halloween decorations, but there were skulls everywhere.
Actual skulls?
No,
Or
Like
orthopedic,
Halloween skulls.
Halloween.
Mixture of these people collected these. I mean, they'd have blood on them. They'd look Halloweeny. there was
You
a
tagged
fetish.
them.
Of,
You think they were real?
no.
Well, shout out to my first client. Who, they'll know who they are. It was my listing that we had 2 pet snakes in the listing. And I had to disclose it on the MLS. And it still sold. It was not a big deal.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where like I made sure to disclose it because I know some people have such
Yeah.
a phobia of them. And I just worked with that client to make sure that like during the open house, during showings, that there was like a blanket over there. I forget like
Yeah.
the
Terrarium.
tank.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, and pets, like that's a whole nother thing.
Yes.
Oh my
I
gosh, I love all the dogs at showings though.
No, I don't mind the
I
dogs.
do not.
What's your worst house you've walked through?
Oh, I don't even know. I can like imagine as you guys are talking. I've definitely walked through some houses that were definitely like
Hoarder
not.
houses.
Yeah, and it's not like I judge that because it's sad
Look past it,
situations,
right.
and I look past that exactly. But there's definitely been times like I've walked through a house one time and it was dark at night. You know, at some point in Texas, it gets during the year it gets really dark really early.
6
So,
o'clock.
but it had no electricity. The house didn't have any. So I remember this was my first experience like this, and it was with clients who I had not. I didn't know them. I had met them like 2 days before that, so they were still kind of new to me, and that's probably a whole other thing, like safety. We should definitely talk about that because September is safety, Realtor Safety Month. But we were walking through, and I made them go ahead of me for sure because you can
Definitely do
get
that
like
if you don't
this
know
like
clients.
you
Gut
can get this
feeling.
like gut feeling, creepy feeling. We definitely heard some noises in the background, so I'm like, I don't know if there's someone squatting in this
Squatters.
house because
Scary. It happens. I've been in a squatter house.
Yep,
That's
and
good.
I know that I haven't. Yeah, I've seen where you've opened up a closet. That's why I don't open closets in vacant houses anymore. Because I've opened a closet before and seen like it was like newspapers and like trash, or not like trash, but like wrappers and stuff. So I was like, someone was definitely squatting right there. You could just tell.
I have a story about that.
So that's definitely been more of my craziest instance on selling or showing. I have had some really creepy calls, like people that want me to want to go see a house, and you could just tell like the questions they're asking are not appropriate
Jake
and
from
not
State Farm?
right. Yeah, they're not legit questions, and so I've just learned to like not accept those.
Yeah.
So the worst one that I've walked through, both the couple had sadly passed. They were older, but no one wanted to go through their house. So it was like they like hoarded, but kind of like instead of like doing it in an organized way, they had just like thrown everything everywhere. Whoever was going through it, and there was raccoons
sad.
living
Yeah,
in the
usually it's just
house,
sad.
like and it was out in the country. So like, and you could just tell like whoever had it wasn't taking care of it.
Yeah.
And so and the electricity was off, and so that was just
Yeah.
like.
I
So
absolutely hate
sad.
walking houses that do not have
Power.
power.
Yeah.
That's
Have
why
y'all ever-
I keep
Scary.
a.
You gotta
a
go through the
flashlight
back
now.
door, like, it's
Yeah.
just,
Have
Maggie,
y'all
what was
ever,
yours?
this just made me think of like foreclosed houses. Have y'all ever walked through like a house that's just
I have.
completely?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
so sad. Like
Well,
just stuff everywhere and like
or like when they just take stuff and start beating through the walls because
Yeah,
they're mad
one,
at stuff.
I had one
Like
that was
when they start,
had words spray painted in it. So the same
Yeah.
client had the spray paint house. He had the original house I just talked about, and then a third one was a squatter house in downtown. That was I actually wouldn't walk through it.
Yeah.
I opened the door. Saw
That's what I
it,
mean. You just
and I
like
was
tell them like,
well, you're on your own, buddy. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not walking through this. And he's like,
Yeah.
I'm like, you can still carry. You go right along.
Yep, exactly.
I'm not walking in there.
actually, yeah, that reminds me. I have been in a foreclosure house where it was like graffitied. They had ripped things out. But
awful.
the funniest thing, and actually, these clients might actually listen to our podcast. We still joke about it all the time. The funniest thing was they had spray painted. It was an image of Big Papa, and underneath it said Big Papa. So we always refer to it as the Big Papa house.
That's
Oh my god.
awesome.
So there's some funny stuff that
But
comes
it's-
out of that.
I went to a foreclosure one time and it was a $1 million house. It was
Right.
beautiful, but they had taken all of the doorknobs.
Yeah.
That's what they
So,
chose. is
yeah.
They took
It's
the
like-
doorknobs.
Because
Like,
you don't, but those
like-
doorknobs, you never know what they would had installed in that home. It's like
Yeah.
you never know.
on the
Yeah.
interior though, I'm like,
But I don't
oh,
get it. It's like why would
Side,
someone,
just because people get attached to the weirdest things, or
Yeah.
people can resell
Maybe they were,
the weirdest
like,
things. Maybe they'd had
yeah,
like
no
French
light
antique
fixtures,
doorknobs
no
installed.
doorknobs.
that's so weird to me.
That's
Yeah.
a quick side note because you made me think of this. Do y'all nickname your houses when they're under contract?
If they're
no,
if
I-
they have character.
I
do.
almost always do. So like when I was married, Jason would be like, oh, what house, like, which one are you talking to? And or talking about, and I would have a nickname for the property.
Yeah.
That was just like the way that I could remember them, easier than like client names or something like that. Like whatever stood out to me at the house or some sort of funny situation.
Yeah, I don't do it for all, but we definitely like when clients and I are looking, if we looked at more than one, we're like, oh yeah, the hot tub house, or oh, there was one, this just reminded me, there was one that I walked in and it had a room full, and I've got a picture somewhere, I'll have to show you guys. It was teddy bears. So like literally the teddy bear was on the light switch. You got teddy bears and all of the things. It was all teddy bears.
Yeah.
So that was a teddy bear house.
I had a Harry Potter house.
One of my, what did you say?
A Harry Potter house.
I thought you said corner house, because that was one. My clients, the very first house we saw, it was on a corner lot, and it was, you know, everything that they wanted, and perfect house, and it took us, you know, a few months after, but we found it. But we still call it the corner house.
Corner house.
What do you guys say when you leave a house and you can tell your clients don't love it? Do you have like a saying?
I think the most common thing is like, well, you know, like you gotta get through it to get past it. Or like, I feel like a lot of people are like, you know, well, you'll know when you know. I feel like there's so many funny things to say.
Like,
I had a referral from Lindsay, so her clients moved.
Lindsay, Texas?
Yes,
What?
but she was from Chicago, so her clients from Chicago that she sold moved to Dallas
Whoa.
last February.
That's crazy. That's where Chris is from.
But we would walk through these houses that they thought they loved, and then we would leave, and one of our clients was like, well, Lindsay used to just close the door and say like, well, we saw it.
Oh my gosh, that's so
like,
funny.
but like, so now I always think of that, like if I can tell my clients don't like it, I think of Lindsay, and I'm like, well, we saw it. Like,
Yeah.
I do say that. I'm like, well, at least we know now.
Yeah.
we saw
Yeah.
it.
So what's like the craziest story you guys have like with your clients? Like, have you guys had a crazy client? Like, I don't know if I should.
Yeah.
Dealing with clients, because here's the thing is we deal with a lot of personalities, and that's something we're not trained on. When you become a real estate agent, you don't realize like that's a huge part of your job. Is you just have to learn there's different personality types. There's different, you know, people find things more important than other stuff.
That's the hardest, is like when they cannot agree and then cannot agree.
Yeah.
Like when they both want something.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
decision makers.
I have a client who like he is dead set on he needs longhorns and 20 acres, and he would live in a trailer on that, and
Yeah.
she's like, no,
Yeah.
that doesn't work for
Yeah.
me. And so like finding that compromise or like
I've had
finding the
some.
houses, like there was like beautiful houses, and he'd be like, it's half an acre.
I'm suddenly
like that. We
thankful.
can't put a longhorn in there. I'm sorry.
I work with a lot of single gay guys.
That's where it's funny. It's funny because that reminds me. Remember that picture I screenshotted when I was in the portal where one of my buyers said,
Oh,
"I
yeah.
love it," and the other one said, "I absolutely hate it." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Great, this is a
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
start." I know.
Those notes
So
are so funny. They'll like, I've buyers right now that'll be like, "Hey babe, do you like this?" And they like chat on it.
It's in
like,
the one.
Yeah.
The one.
Yeah,
home
Yeah.
thing.
yeah.
I know
So-
one of mine today, she messaged me. She's like, I'm so sorry, my husband just loves leaving those notes. And I'm like, it's fine.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I like reading them.
Yeah. It's good for us.
Okay, I guess better question. What's like, because we're talking the bad, the ugly, and the worst. What's like your least favorite thing about real estate? That's a good one, huh?
I think the breaking of the ice with the clients, like having to meet them initially.
Having to
Like
get to know
have
them.
like no, but like having to meet like meeting a
Or-
stranger.
okay.
Right? Like if it's really someone you don't know, it's not a referral, like meeting them at a coffee shop and like kind of making sure that you're comfortable.
The blind
right?
date is
Yeah,
what I
so
still,
it's a
I still
blind
kind
date.
of call it
Yeah.
a blind date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd
Or
say-
like going into someone's house for a listing that you don't know them too. Like sometimes that's uncomfortable, and that's
Oh yeah.
Mine is
Like-
so different.
Yeah.
What's
Mine
yours?
is
Go ahead.
like driving all the time.
oh, I love driving.
Or like
That
just
could
like
be
the
a part of
crazy
it.
long hours. Like,
Yeah.
but I
Oh.
mean, that's my choice. That's up to me.
Yeah.
But.
I would say my least favorite thing is not being able to turn it off. And
Yeah.
maybe that's my own personal issue, but
I think that's all of our issues.
yeah, it's hard. And the fact that a lot of agents struggle with that tells
Mm-hmm.
me that it's not just me, but also like that kind of comes with the job. So learning how to turn it off is probably, or not being able to.
Definitely.
How do you go into confidence with the like blind dates?
You're talking about like when
Know
I
your
meet a
worth.
new.
Know your value. It's
Yeah.
like I know like what I bring to the table, it's either gonna be a match for them or it's not.
Yeah.
And I don't get hung up on like I have
Definitely.
to land this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
For sure.
I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me.
I mean, I think we can have a whole podcast about what our buying consultation looks like and seller consultation, because I do the same thing every time. Like there is that awkward period of like breaking the ice.
Right.
If they were referred to me, oh, how do you know so and so? Like, so there's ways that I get into it, and then it's like that's gone. Like or the nervousness is gone of like,
Right.
okay, we're good, we got
Yeah.
this.
Definitely.
Jake, what's your least favorite?
I think my least favorite part is when there is conflict with the agent on the opposite side.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
That's not always bad. You know, sometimes agents, like, even when there's conflict, the agent is still logical and is like, okay, we're going to get to the end of this. Like, we're gonna work together to
We
get
have the
through
same
this.
goal.
Like, even if like both clients are upset, like I've had another times where agents are like, but you and I can figure this out.
Right.
What I think my really, like, when I mean conflict with other agents, a lot of times it's, let's say, well-seasoned agents that are like, well, I've been doing this for a lot longer than you. It's like the moment I hear that,
I
I'm like,
absolutely hate that.
I'm like,
It makes
okay,
me-
well, I looked up your transaction count for the last 12 months and you really haven't sold a third of what I
I know.
have. You know,
And
it's
see,
like,
I always look up license numbers, and
Yeah.
even if they're like old license number, I always still look them up, and then I'm like, yeah, you've sold
Right.
3 houses. And
so I
that's-
think
Yeah.
I think it's my least favorite part can be other agents' attitudes during
Yeah.
conflict or
Yeah.
during issues.
Yeah, and I think I realized that early on. Like I remember at the very beginning of my career, like I felt like I had to be aggressive, or I had to not be mean, but I had to get a little bit aggressive with the other agent to get our way or to make it work out. There are times when I felt like I did that, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is not my personality. What am I doing? But it was like I was upset because things weren't working out or whatever.
right.
I realized real quick that I'm probably going to run across these agents if I plan to be in this business, you know, for a
the long
long
haul.
time. I'm probably going to see this agent again.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's like a very short list of agents that I don't want to work with again necessarily. And that's because it was a terrible experience, not because of the issues that happened, you know, that we've talked
It's
about.
how they treated you.
How they
we
treated
have
the
a list of
transaction.
agents that I do not want to work with.
Or they
We
weren't
all
ethical
do.
or whatever the reason.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely.
I
I
recently.
think I mean, that's just a big thing. It's like, and how you on the other side look at conflict. Like, we have the same goal. Your client either wants to sell the house or buy it, and my client wants the opposite. So it's like, we all want the same thing.
We wanna
You
use
want the
the
transaction to
closing
close. I don't want clients to begin looking at how we all want the same
Yeah.
thing. So if you can't see past that to be able to work through the conflict, then you're not doing your job. And
Yeah.
I've had other agents like, well, your job is to get this closed. I'm like, no, my job is to represent what my clients want. And
Right.
if we get to a point where my clients don't want it to close, then my job is to make sure that we get out of it and don't have to close on that property.
Yeah.
You know, so I feel like it's like that push and pull of there's a way to get through conflict respectfully. And,
Yeah.
you know, I've definitely have had some agents where it's like, please just never speak to me again and lose my
Yeah.
number.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
I'm
my
thankful we closed that our state isn't a closing where we all close at the same table.
Yeah.
I'm like definitely have had transactions where I'm like, we wouldn't all be able to sit down at the same table and do that.
Yeah, I definitely think we need another podcast about like realtor etiquette, if you
yeah,
will. Like
that's a good one.
I think that's also a good, but because my biggest pet peeve with other agents is like ones that don't respond, like answer. And I'm not saying you have to respond within 20, you know, or even at 24 hours sometimes, depending on like the importance of the, you know,
Right.
question or whatever it is we need. I have had some agents that I feel like as soon as we go under contract, it's like I don't even talk to them until closing.
Right.
And I'm like,
This just
I'm
made
like,
me
what?
think. I had one agent that refused to answer her phone, but she would text. So I
Oh my
literally talked on the phone with her maybe twice. Everything was text, everything was email. It drove me
So
crazy.
I'm not opposed to that because
Yeah, I
I
don't
prefer
care.
a paper trail for
Well,
everything.
yeah.
If there's conflict and you need to work through
There
an
was
issue, or not conflict,
Yeah.
but if there's
Or
an
like,
issue and
yeah.
you need to work through it on the phone, then I totally understand
Definitely.
that. But I also have had an agent, and I remember who you are, that I called to discuss an issue, and they declined my call, text me and said, I'm busy, text me. So I text them the issue, and then immediately miraculously could call me back. And I was like, that's not how this game is going to work. So,
Yeah, that's
like,
crazy.
maybe it was an auto text. I'm just giving them the benefit of the doubt, but
girl, it was not. That auto text was really lengthy for what she's. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
But yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was specific enough. It was
Right.
not a
Right.
a text from your Apple Watch or something that you can just
Right.
send.
Yeah, no, for sure. I would say, yeah, being responsive, like that's, and like you said, like we have the same goal and everything else. So it's like,
Definitely.
we got to work on this together. So,
I think
yeah.
with that, if you're listening and you ever think of topics you're hearing us talk about that you want us to touch on more,
Yeah,
message
let
us.
us know.
Yeah.
Let us know because I feel
For
like
sure.
we always go down rabbit holes. We
I
have
know,
a ton of
and
things
like-
to talk about.
So many things happen, like no transaction's the same.
Well-
You're like
Yeah.
always learning. It's just like, yeah, roller coaster.
I feel like I'm doing like lots of roll calls. That's my thing today for this episode.
I love it.
Have you had a contract terminate that didn't finish? Like, not that like it had an issue. I know, like I know the answer to this, but like, yes, have you had one that just did not finish? Okay. Did you have one terminate that didn't make it through?
Well, yes. I've definitely had during the option period things back out for sure. I'm trying to think if I've had one terminate past that.
I've had one terminate past option. We could get out because of financing.
Same.
See, I've never had anything fall out.
Actually, due to HOA dogs.
See, I've never had anything that terminated outside of a contingency, like the option financing, things like that.
Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about. Is like those transactions because that is a moment where like neither side really likes or wants to get that phone call like, oh, we're backing out.
Right.
But like you definitely have either had to make that call or you've received it.
Yeah, it's no fun. And even representing, so like I always look at it as like, okay, if you're on the listing side and a buyer backs out of the contract, you have no control over that. That's their right to do during the option. So going back to the market, at least you still have a listing that could sell. So that's great. But then I also think on the buyer side, like you also could be on the listing side and it never sell. I've definitely have had things terminate or like us, get rid of or take things off the market with listings.
Like a listing expire.
I've had them expire. Yeah, and that is normal, right? Especially like right now, this market's a little too hot for that to happen. But in 2013, 14, whatever, it was more common that things could expire if you were overpriced. And it just was one of those things that they wouldn't agree with me that it was overpriced, but it expired. And then guess what? They never sold. So
she sold it 7 years later.
Yeah. Well, I watch them. I watch to see, and there was one that she relisted it lower than what I had asked them to even as to reduce the price. It still didn't sell. They ended up selling for like much less than what at that point. So it is what it is. But yeah. So what else? I feel like we haven't given them all of the bad parts of real estate. Like what's the
inspections?
The worst.
The inspections.
Worst inspection.
Yeah, inspections are brutal. Financing's brutal. It's all just because it really is. It's like one of those things that anything could go wrong at any minute. So you just have to know how to handle it when it goes wrong.
Before inspections, I'm always like, okay, here we go. What are we going to find out?
I always show up early before the buyer so I can hear the nitty gritty before they have to hear it. So I'm like, okay, tell me how this is going to go.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you never know what's, even if it's a beautiful house, I mean, it could
be.
Find
something.
If it's a year-old house.
Yeah, even if it's a new construction house. So I know someone personally that their dryer vent had not been punched through.
Yeah,
so it's like, and which like all the way through to the brick, like it did not exist. So like your dryer would have just been backing up into your drywall.
Oh, wow.
So one of the houses I closed on earlier this year, the inspector noticed that when they did like new siding on the wall, they covered it up. Like they just covered it up.
Oh
my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's all sorts of things.
But that's why inspection is to find these things that you would never know until catches fire in your house.
Definitely. Yeah. I had a recent one. The plumbing was done just completely backwards. Would have never passed city inspection, which it didn't. And the appraiser noted that. But we had already negotiated them for like the seller to completely redo it and get it permitted. But I really thought we were going to terminate if they wouldn't have. I mean, we would have. I told the client, like, we need to back out of this if, they don't. But it's still, there was an issue 2 days before closing. And
have you guys, I'm just going to ask this question. Have you guys ever been cussed out by, like, a client or an agent?
Of course I have. You know.
I don't know for sure. I know.
Y'all would probably say I'm like the sassiest of the four. Yeah. Mouthy, maybe even at times. And so I definitely keep it professional. I don't think I've been cussed out by a client. I know I have not been.
I have.
I've been very strongly yelled at by a different agent.
I've been yelled at by an agent.
I've been cussed at by an agent, and I literally just laughed on the phone. Like, that was my reaction. There was nothing else I could do. I'm like, okay, well, call me back. I literally, in my head, I'm thinking, like, call me back when you, like, found your marbles that you clearly have just lost. I mean, the whole thing finished, and I just was like, so what I'm hearing is it's not a good time to talk. That was literally my response.
I love it. That's a great.
So, and then it was like, they hung up on me. So yes, I've definitely been cussed out.
She didn't cuss me out, but she definitely yelled at me, and then she sent her clients all of my information, so they gave it to me.
Wait, what?
Wait, what? She sent what?
Her clients all
Your
of my
information? So
her
they could cuss you
clients-
out?
Yeah.
Which
Oh,
technically, okay,
that's
like that's
awful.
really weird to do, but the clients could have looked you up anyways.
True.
Yeah.
All
but,
of our information is on all of
but
our.
for her to be like, here's the other agent's info.
Yeah,
like,
and
it's
I never
super
talked to her
awful.
again. She
that's very
made them-
unprofessional.
Super awful.
Yeah, that's rude.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
fun.
Tacky.
That was a James
Yeah.
tan.
Those are fun. Okay, other question.
No, have you been cussed out?
Oh yeah. No, I've
She's
been,
like, proudly.
yes. I have definitely been
I've
cussed out by
earned
another
it.
agent. I have been cussed out by clients, and the reason I got cussed out by a client was because they didn't feel like I was showing them the right properties, and I'm like, I'm showing you the properties you keep telling. Like, it was just the most random thing. I think they're just having a bad day. It was fine. We figured it out and became friends. So yes, I've definitely been cussed out. My other question, because I feel like this is like we could definitely have a whole thing about this. How often do you cry?
Oh gosh.
How often does real estate make you cry?
Jake
A lot.
knows It's really hard to make me cry, but it gets me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not typically a crier.
Have you cried about a transaction?
I have cried in general while multiple transactions with issues all.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
it sometimes like hits you in waves.
Yes.
And so like it's very much like a roller coaster. Like when it's up, it's totally up. When it's down, it feels like you're completely down.
And I feel like it's not even like just real estate, it's like life and real
Yeah.
estate, right? Like when I
Absolutely.
finally break, it's when like everything is just
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I had
Yeah.
like 4 transactions going on like shortly after my divorce, like within a couple weeks. And so like those were all lovely. To navigate, it's like I just had a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And so I think definitely around then it was more like a life cry. I know for sure I've cried over one transaction specifically, that the agent was unbearable. The other client was unbearable. My client was frustrated. I just felt like the world hated me in that
Yeah.
moment. And I was like, well, I can't win for any of you. So like, what
Yeah.
do I do? And so like, it just like a good cry helps every now and then.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I cried at least twice during this one option period that was recent. Longest option period of 2
7 days, 5 days, 3 days.
It was 7, but
Ugh.
it was literally the hardest one of like to date. Hardest.
Because of
plumbing, the foundation, which it didn't actually need to be.
Were you on the listing or buyer side?
Buyer side.
Okay.
And the listing agent was out of town. This was in Fort Worth. So I was like,
Was that a listing agent? I'm always out of town.
It was like, so I was going back and forth, and we were famous in this plumber's office, like with how the plumbing was. Like I'd call and they'd be like, "Oh, you're the agent on XYZ." Like it was
Is
done.
that bad?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
But
no.
we got through it.
Yeah, I've
And the
definitely.
plumbing's perfect now.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you
Yeah.
get through it, but sometimes you need a good cry, like just to kind of cope with it. But I agree. Like I feel like sometimes I get super overwhelmed with everything at once. I remember one year. This was 2017. It was. Yeah, the year I was getting married. It was the day of my birthday. It was on my birthday. I had so many people pulling me in so many directions. I had a client that was pulling me over here. I had another one pulling me here. I needed to put in an offer by this time. It was just so many things at once. And I was like, it's my birthday. Like, I just wanted to not work. But of course, I couldn't. I just lost it. That was probably the worst time I've like cried over real estate.
Yeah.
But definitely when I get overwhelmed, and I definitely have had like where you just get, and it's good that we care because
Half the
it's
time,
good,
yeah.
but we do cry about transactions because we want the clients to be happy. We want the transactions to all go well. They're not going to, but it's just really tough.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Half the time I cry like when I'm tired,
Same. That's
And
what
overwhelmed.
I always blame my tears. I'm just tired.
like
Yeah.
exhausted.
Need
yeah.
a- yeah.
And I'm like, oh
Just
my
need a minute.
Yeah. You get to the, what's the word I'm looking for? Not like a breaking point, but you
Yeah.
get, you kind of, yeah. So, and Brandie, you've cried. Yes.
I like it so hard to get me to cry. I'm like a stone. I like really have to let myself go. I think the last time I cried was when I didn't have help with the kids and I had to take them to showings. And taking a 2 and 3-year-old to Fort Worth for showings is like so hard. I just like missed my parents, and I think that was like the hardest part was like to see like my parents used to be here, and so like
Right.
doing this by myself, and then also not having like just them to drop the kids off. That's
Yeah.
like what broke me.
Yeah.
But yeah, normally I'm like a stone, and I can be like, it's fine, I got it.
Yeah.
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 I break, and then I'm like on a floor and pile of
Right.
tears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is our bad,
Ugly and worse.
ugly, and worse. hopefully it's not, I don't know. It's one of those things we wanted to have a whole episode about this just because
The
we want you to
reality of real
know.
estate.
Yeah, it's the reality, and you're not alone. Like, I can tell you how many times client or agents call me crying or something's wrong, and it's nothing that you or anybody's doing wrong. It's just the situation. So having,
Totally.
yeah.
It's the game.
I think
Yeah.
also if you're a client listing, just remember that like we're people.
Yeah.
We do not care if you close in the house if you're going to be unhappy in it.
Yeah.
So it's like we care about you
Right.
getting the right property. So
And then the next time you think we're overpaid, just know
Yeah, right?
we deal with a lot, and I think
it
that's
pays for my therapy.
right. Yeah, I mean seriously, like we should be able to write off therapy, but not just that, but like we deal with a lot of emotion. I think the emotional part of the transaction is literally the worst part of it,
Yeah,
just
we
because.
get so connected with these people that
Right.
like, we want their best, and
Right.
it just
Right.
affects us.
And we understand these are your this is clients' livelihoods. I mean,
the
you know,
most expensive financial decision they
that
Exactly.
and the whole moving process, they're already stressed. So we take a lot of that stress on,
Absolutely.
and that's part of our job. And we are okay with that. Like we've come to terms that we've realized like this is part of the job, and we've learned how to cope with it for the most part. But it's also, yeah, it is what it is. And so we also love it. So we'll have a whole nother episode about our, the good parts. Because
Right.
it's not all bad, but there's definitely bad parts. So when you see us on Instagram,
Yeah.
Smiling.
it's like, hey, another closing.
Yeah.
It took a lot to get to that closing.
Absolutely.
It
So
takes so many like moving parts and just it takes a lot
Yeah,
to
it is.
get to
Absolutely.
the closing
It is.
table.
So we'll share with us your bad, worst, and ugly. We want to hear as real estate agents, or even if you are a client, like tell us your experience of the bad, worst, and
Or
ugly.
lenders, title
Yeah.
officers,
Yes,
so
everybody.
many
Yeah.
other people attached to the
Or even
transaction
small
as
businesses. Small businesses
Yeah.
have had
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what people don't see, but
Right.
it's bad.
Right.
So share that with us.
you could be a
We wanna
cake
know.
decorator and you still probably have some sort of horror story
Oh,
about with
gosh,
clients.
definitely.
For sure.
If you deal with
Bridezillas.
clients in any way, like it's enough to where there's enough moving parts, you probably have a horror story to share.
Absolutely. We
Share
want to
them
know.
below.
All right, guys.
All right,
We'll see you
bye.
next week.
See y'all next time.
Bye.